Elden Ring Weapons. There are a wide variety of them, and they range from underwhelming to incredibly awesome. And somewhere in the middle of that is weird, and that's why we're here today. Here are 15 of the weirdest weapons in Elden Ring. Ringed Finger. This weapon looks like it was made in an alternate universe where the Avengers decided to prevent Thanos' snap in a more direct way. And just like you'd expect a Thanos finger weapon to be, its damage is inevitable. On a more serious note, this weapon is thought to have been cut from an ancestor of the Finger Creeper and looks as if there is still some life that remains in the weapon. The rings that cover the weapon do make it look more regal than just a plain purple finger, which I guess for the sake of this video would have made it weirder. Ghiza's Wheel. A pizza cutter straight out of Satan's kitchen that even Gordon Ramsay would scoff at. The Ghiza's Wheel is nothing to be messed with. The wheel, which is lined with flesh-flaying blades, was a torture device, shocker, used by Inquisitor Ghiza himself. It was also adopted for use as the iconic weapon wielded by the Iron Virgins. If used in the right way and at the right time, this weapon can slice up anything that stands before you in the lands between. Iron Ball. This next weapon will have you bobbing and weaving, hitting your enemies with the best 1-2 combo ever seen by a Tarnished. The Iron Ball is Big Bogart, the Blackguard's weapon of choice, and can be obtained by defeating him. This weapon is also different from the typical weapons you'd expect here in Elden Ring. We think of the gargantuan swords and the magic, but not two iron balls that encapsulate your fists so that you can pummel your enemies like you're the Elden Ring version of Hitmonchan. Jar Cannon. The name of this weapon describes it perfectly. It is a cannon that is made out of a jar. It looks goofy, weird, and amazing all at the same time. The jar cannon does a lot of damage, like you would hope a cannon would, but it is very slow to reload, so you'll have to pick and choose when the best time to use this is, because it will be leaving you quite vulnerable. It's also important to note that the projectiles the cannon fired do have an AoE effect to them that allows you to deal damage to multiple enemies in a close area. The jar cannon is said to be an experimental firearm brought to the assault on Volcano Manor, where it was discovered that no one actually knew how to use it, which I guess is fair because I'm not sure we would know how to operate a cannon fashioned out of a jar the first time we picked it up either. Cranial Vessel Candlestand. Having a head attached to any weapon is a pretty easy way to get put on this list, but the reason why this weapon is the way it is might be the weirdest part about it. The candlestand itself was used to worship Barak, the most hallowed monk prelate of the Giant's Flame. Concerned over the lazy arrogance that the monks treated the flame with, Barak decided to sever his own head as a lesson to the others, which is a weird way to go about doing it, but once again, that's why it's on the list. The attack of this weapon, other than the basic melee, forces you to be at a complete standstill and plumes fire out of the end of the candlestick in a complete 360-degree radius around you, dealing massive damage and making you look pretty cool in the process, even if you are carrying around the candlestick with the guy's head attached to it. Saint Trina's Torch. The Saint Trina's Torch is a torch that burns with a light purple flame, which, by the way, looks awesome. The carvings on the torch depict Saint Trina, but in adult form. What makes this weapon unique and strange is that instead of hitting, stabbing, or even burning your enemies like you would expect, it puts them to sleep. Because the enemies have been working super hard protecting the lands between, and they deserve some rest too, right? It's just adorable, which in the world of Elden Ring also equates to weird. Envoy Horn. Who in the world knew the bubbles could be so murderous and violent? Well, apparently almost everything in Elden Ring is that way, so it makes sense the bubbles would be that way too. The golden horn comes from the Oracle Envoys and has a solid amount of weight to it. Its original use was to be an instrument, but it's not one that can be sounded by a mere human. So murderous bubble machine seems like the next logical evolution to that, right? Now we know what you're thinking, the bubbles can't inflict that much damage, right? Well, whatever these bubbles are made out of cause a whole bunch of pain when they are popped, leaving your enemies dead and embarrassed by the fact that they just got beaten by a Tarnished with a bubble horn. Blasphemous Blade. It makes sense that the weapon of a boss that made it into our weirdest bosses in Elden Ring video would make it onto this list. The Blasphemous Blade was the sacred sword of Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, which we hope you tried to clean it off after defeating him, because if you've seen the cutscene, then you know. This blade embodies weirdness with the remains of the individuals Rykard has devoured that are attached to the surface of this blade, squirming about as you slice through new challenges in the lands between. The default skill on this weapon, the Taker's Flames, has an amazing aesthetic that makes you feel powerful as you slam your blade down and watch as a wall of flames fly towards your enemies to engulf them. Another aspect of this blade is that it does restore some HP whenever you do defeat an enemy. One-eyed shield. Our first thought when we saw this was, what the hell is this? It's a shield, obviously, but why does it look like that? Well, it's made from white stone and is depicting a malformed one-eyed god that was once worshipped by the giants. The evil deity that is represented in the shield is believed to have been slain by Queen Marika herself. The shield is large and cumbersome, and it also has a real "say hello to my little friend" surprise in the form of a barrel that pokes through the mouth of the shield. Fiery projectiles are fired through this barrel, leaving your enemies dead and your Tarnished incredibly sore from having to carry and reload this giant contraption. Fighting with this weapon will be a challenge due to how slow you are with it and how vulnerable you are while reloading. This weapon is definitely weird, but it wouldn't be our first choice for taking out any bosses. Varre Bouquet. Oh, roses! How cute! Wrong! There is no cute in Elden Ring, only pain and suffering. What you thought was a charming bouquet of roses is actually a steel mace with each petal having a sharpened edge, leaving the roses perpetually colored with the blood of the enemies that stood us up on Valentine's Day. This weapon doesn't have the best blunt melee damage, but if you're able to string together multiple hits, the bleed damage on this weapon is fantastic. Plus, running through the lands between slaying enemies with a murderous bouquet of roses just sounds romantic, doesn't it? Family heads. Nothing, and I mean nothing, says weird like a few heads chained to a handle that are designed to do dark magic. But why exactly is the weapon called family heads instead of 3 heads attached to a stick? Well, this weapon was the signature weapon of a heretical sage that went by Necromancer Garrus. The heads, which is where things start to get real weird and why this weapon made this list, were made to resemble his wife and 2 children. Hence, family heads. So you're essentially using your dead family to demolish your enemies in the lands between. Grafted Dragon. Another weapon that can be achieved after beating one of our weirdest bosses in Elden Ring. You'll have to use Godrick's Remembrance to get the ability to purchase the Grafted Dragon. And while it's nowhere near the size and scale of the dragon that Godrick controlled, it is still a dragon attached to your arm that you get to control. Weird? Yes. Awesome? Also yes. This weapon does exactly what you would expect a dragon that is attached to your arm to do. Spew flames all over your enemies until they are nothing more than ash. Its attack can take a bit to charge up, but it can be a great crowd control weapon to deal damage to a large group of enemies. Oh, I don't know if we mentioned this yet, but it's a dragon attached to your arm. Enough said. Devourer Scepter. Just because it's weird doesn't mean it can be awesome looking at the same time, right? Because the Devourer Scepter might be the best looking weapon on this list. It is a scepter in the shape of a serpent that is devouring the world. It allows you to heal yourself, and it's also one of the 9 legendary armaments in Elden Ring, which are some of the most powerful weapons in the game. Which makes sense, because we would hope that a weapon that has a snake eating an entire world on it would be powerful. This weapon is actually the embodiment of a vision of the future briefly seen by Rykard in his final moments before being devoured by the Great Serpent. Marika's Hammer. This weapon is only attainable after beating the final boss, the Elden Beast. Once defeated, you'll get the Elden Remembrance, which you can then trade in for Marika's Hammer. The hammer is made out of stone and was crafted in the lands of the Numen, outside of the lands between. This was, in fact, the tool that Queen Marika herself shattered the Elden Ring with. When shattering the ring, the hammer partially broke, becoming splintered with rune fragments that give it a glowing appearance. As you would expect and want, this hammer hits hard. It also has some amazing particle effects that truly make it one of the most unique weapons in a game full of unique weapons. Bastard Stars. This weapon is composed of the same star debris that comprised Astal. The Bastard Stars is a flail that deals magic damage thanks to it being imbued with the power of the remembrance of Astal. Its glowing nature with planets dangling from it truly help it stand out as a one-of-one weapon in this game. Its default skill, Nebula, allows you to cast a cosmic smoke that engulfs and combusts everyone around you. Woo! So we have made it to the end of the list, ladies and gentlemen. 15 of the weirdest weapons in Elden Ring. I would love to know down in the comments, what was your favorite weapon? Which one did you think was the weirdest? And which one are you gonna go to try to get right after watching this video? We truly appreciate you watching, and if you enjoyed, consider leaving a like and subscribing for future videos, and we'll see you in the next one.